I'm going to read to you now something from this delightful book um, by Lama Yeshe, one of my great heroes that I never had a chance to meet because he passed away, I believe, in 1983. He was a great Tibetan master um, in the early 70s and up into the early 80s who brought Tantric Buddhism to the West, many of the esoteric practices. And he has this book called Vajrasattva, Becoming Vajrasattva, the Tantric Path of Purification. It's very, very lovely book. Um, and this will tie in a bit to our theme tonight, the second factor of awakening, of seven factors of awakening we find in the mindfulness text that the Buddha taught, the Satipatthana Sutra, on how we practice mindfulness and also the fruits of the practice as they arise along with the four foundations of practice. And I'll review that a bit. So if you weren't here last week, you'll get a quick refresh or a quick flash instruction on those. So Lama Yeshe in this book talks a lot about this quality called shunyata, which has been translated as emptiness by Western scholars, emptiness. And it's not a terribly accurate word because for many people, emptiness implies nothingness. And absolutely, that's not what shunyata means. In fact, interestingly, I was talking to my girlfriend about this weekend. She is from China, and she practices a form of sort of Pure Land Chinese Buddhism along with the Tantric Vajrayana Buddhism of Tibetan Buddhism. It's sort of a hybrid. And she was saying that in the texts that are translated from the Chinese into Buddhism, that they don't translate that word. They just use shunyata, and they teach it as such. But when we translate that into English, often it's come to mean it's been translated as emptiness, but it tends to be a little bit misleading. And so I like sort of consistent with what she told me that it's nice just to use the words as they are, but they have to be explained and they have to be kind of nuanced and unpacked. So shunyata is really about a quality more of profound openness in such a way that the programming, the conditions, the mind of concepts um, and grasping and clinging and identification, all of those filters fall away. We are left with uh, not nothingness, but a bright, immanent something that cannot be defined, cannot be formed or quantified or qualified in any way, but it is a deep experience of what we call sort of open awareness, an awareness that some people will call naked awareness. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have this notion of naked awareness, which is awareness without the forms, shapes, or um, or identifications, concepts, and all of that. It's just self-evident. This awareness is always there. It is always underlying all of the thoughts and the projections and the reactions and the aversions and attachments that we tend to cycle through in even in one day, much less 1 hour or week. So um, anyway, that's a big part of the non-duality of Tibetan Buddhism is really this focus on shunyata. And so Lama Yeshe, consistent with this approach, I'm going to read you this passage. Now he also has, if you've ever seen any of his videos on YouTube, he has quite a sense of humor. So I will try to do my best to honor how he communicates, so you get the spirit of what he's writing. Hmm. We often feel insecure. On the way to meet someone, we think, maybe she won't like me. Maybe he won't like me. Or I wish I were better looking. Maybe she won't like the way I speak. And things like that. All such thoughts derive from insecure and wrong conceptions and misinterpretations. As soon as we realize that everything has been painted by our own mind, that our illusory views and thoughts and feelings are not even relatively true, let alone absolutely true, then we stop feeling insecure. Even if others abuse us, call us thieves and the like. I don't know if any of you are ever called a thief. I hope not. It's been a long time since someone's called me that. We'll have control and we will not suffer. Such are the practical benefits of this kind of understanding. We live, after all, in the sense world, believing that the misconceptions and projections of our ignorant mind are true. We think that seeing is believing. I saw that, it must be true. Some people believe passionately that their philosophy is the ideal one for their society. Ooh, I fall into that trap. Communist or capitalist, both are wrong. And both are hallucinations! Exclamation point. If we go on like this, we shall never discover shunyata. It must be true. Um, it will always be somewhere else. When we realize that our view of the world is a hallucination, that our view of reality is obscured by the heavy blanket of delusion, the wrong view disappears, and we are left with its opposite, the right view of shunyata. The moment we extinguish this dualistic mind, we experience shunyata. Shunyata. So I'm already anticipating what is in your mind here, because there is a dualism implicit in shunyata being the right view, apart from the wrong view, right? We're automatically in this dual mind. And I think the point here isn't so much to get spun off into an apparent paradox, but largely that this experience of profound openness is also extremely clear, and it's crystal clear. There is a presence of mind that is luminous and bright in the midst of all of this, that isn't sort of painting pictures and projecting out onto the world. It just accepts all things as they are in any given moment. It doesn't mean we agree with everything, but we are seeing clearly. And so shunyata is really sort of beyond that sort of right and wrong dualism that he alludes to here. So that's one thing. And how this will be relevant to the second factor of awakening um, is that among the seven factors that we find in the Satipatthana Sutra, the second one is, well, the first one we did last week, which is simply mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is the first factor. So as we follow the instructions the Buddha lays out for us in the mindfulness, his 10th discourse, the mindfulness teachings, and this has been preserved in the Pali Canon, that we begin by being mindful of our physical body. We begin by just sensing, experiencing every part of the body, and that includes our breathing, and it includes meditating on the four elements. This is something that he says you must meditate on these, and we've done that here many times before, um, and so on. And then mindfulness of feelings. So this is the second foundation that we focus on in mindfulness practice. First is body and breath. The second is our feeling states. And feelings involve kind of noticing, what's my energy like today? Am I agitated? Am I feeling fairly calm? Or a minute ago, I was feeling really calm and now I'm feeling restless. You see, just these ever shifting qualities of feeling senses. Or maybe I'm feeling heavy. Maybe I'm feeling a little sorrow today, or a little bit of just sort of thick smoke in my space, thick smoke of suffering. These are all feeling states. And the point here is to receive whatever we're feeling with a sense of open friendliness, kindness, what we call loving kindness or maitri in Sanskrit. Metta is the Pali word for maitri. And receiving with some loving, genuine loving intent. Whatever we encounter, we meet it with loving kindness. And so this is one of the ways we practice with feelings, is simply to respond or bring this quality into whatever arises. And then the third foundation is mind, our thoughts, the mentation, if you will, the mental processes, the mental energy we expend, ruminating, thinking, reacting, evaluating, judging, all of these things, projecting, imagining, creating, uh, and so on and so forth. And so, mind, looking at mind and allowing ourselves to rest in a state in which we are mindful of the quality of our mental body, our thoughts, our thinking mind, and such. And so, rather than reacting into those habitual patterns, we just simply allow ourselves to be in our body. We are embodied as we are bearing witness to feelings and mind. Right? We never leave the body, so we have this solid, stable, wakeful but restful location in the body, and the breath, coming back to breath whenever the mind tends to want to sort of hijack the meditation session or your experience, and coming back to the sensations of the physical body and letting the mind be as it is, not controlling it or reshaping it or doing anything about it. Just allowing it to be like you're watching children on a playground and you're just sort of sitting and just firmly on the bench at the playground, and they're just going through all kinds of drama up and down the slides, fighting with each other. This is sort of an IF. Those of you who are therapists, there'd be a wonderful narrative of the different parts arguing with each other here on this playground. Internal family systems. Um, anyway, we are in that moment. The mindfulness here is just that bearing witness in a loving way to what we're witnessing. We can do this with our own minds, right? So, those first three foundations, body, feelings, mind, the fourth foundation of mindfulness then becomes our insights. It's usually translated as dhammas in Pali or dharmas in the Sanskrit. And basically, it's by meditating on these first three foundations, what kinds of insights do we have into the nature of our mind, right? Maybe there is a reaction that we have in our mind when the body feels a certain way. We feel a little pain here, and the mind picks up on it and starts doing something with it, creating a narrative. What is this pain? And then everything contracts. The breathing starts getting erratic, right? Anxiety arises, and then we have to do more shushing and more sighing. So, um, anyway, so you see, part of that fourth foundation is just watching and getting to know more deeply just this cycle, right? What are the habitual processes of mind? How is my mind and my body and my feelings intertwined? What am I noticing? But not by getting into the water, into the tides, but rather observing and having some clarity without judgment. And so this becomes basically vipassana or vipassana. For those of you who have heard of this term, insight meditation, is very big in the Theravada Buddhist communities, insight meditation. And in Tibetan Buddhism, we have this term vipassana, which is basically the vehicle of creating insights through meditating mindfully and through shamatha. Shamatha is that process of concentrating the mind in a very calm, relaxed way so that peaceful abiding arises naturally through gentle concentration. And so this balance in meditation allows that peaceful abiding to arise naturally. So we are doing this as we practice mindfulness. So shamatha is at the heart of mindfulness practice, this concentrative attention on breath, on body, on the present moment, on sensations, maybe on an image of some kind, imagining that the heart is like a moon disk or a sun disk. A moon disk, if where a mind is restless, calms calms us down. Right? Meditating on the heart as a full moon on a crisp night, meditating on the heart as a sun if we're falling asleep and getting drowsy and so on. This heart sun giving us some energy. You know? So all of this is mindfulness, right? It's all mindfulness. It's all practicing that. And then, so that's the first factor of awakening. The second factor then, interestingly, is that process of vipassana or vipassana. This, what is called investigation of Dharma's awakening factor. It's a mouthful. So At the end of this text, Satipatthana Sutra, which is where the Buddha teaches about mindfulness, is this interesting section that there are 7 factors we cultivate, we are aware of, that indicate the fruits of mindfulness and of insight meditation. And these fruits are things we can be aware of, we can remember, and we can perfect. We can perfect through our efforts in meditation, or in some cases, through our effortlessness in meditation. Um, and part of the text, the Buddha, his refrain is, in this case, and I'm going to translate investigation of dhammas, which is a little cumbersome, to inquiry into truth. And this is kind of my take on investigation of dhammas, is really what we can call inquiring, not intellectually, but with our experience, into what is happening in ourselves right now at any given moment. So, inquiry into truth, the truth of ourselves, or we could say inquiry into insights. I kind of like that. It has a better ring to it. But we're inquiring into ourselves so as to gain deeper insights into why we suffer. This is the endeavor of vipassana or vipassana, and it is also a quality of leading us to what the Buddha tells us in this text is the outcome of mindfulness, which is nirvana or nibbana. Nibbana, Nibbana, is the Pali term. Nirvana, you might be more familiar with, is the Sanskrit. Same thing. So on our way to the the relinquishing of all conditions that create our suffering, our mental anguish, our discontentedness with life, we encounter these 7 factors of awakening. We notice if they are there, we notice if they are not there. And if they're not there, we know that we can generate them. And we know we can perfect them through development. So, this is the refrain here in the 7 factors of awakening. So, for example, um, I notice if mindfulness is not present in me right now. I simply notice. And by noticing, it's likely mindfulness arises because we're aware that we're not mindful. Maybe it doesn't arise, and that's okay. Mindfulness is not present in me, but the third part of this is I know how to cultivate mindfulness to arise. So there's a skillful responding here, and that may involve just coming back into breathing, just like we did with the sighing and the shushing, focusing on the sensations, and we'll practice this in a bit. Um, I'll guide you through a practice, and focusing on sensations, on the present moment, on the sounds around us. But there are ways we can respond to a lack of mindfulness by becoming more mindful. We gain some confidence, some faith that, okay, I think I know what I need to do in order to settle myself here. And we have the confidence that we can actually perfect mindfulness through development. So we know how to arise mindfulness and we know how to perfect it through development. This is the language that Analayo gives us, the great German um, Theravadan monk who has done probably the best translation of this text. So here we are at the second one. The first is mindfulness. The second is inquiry into insights. And again, we know if we are able to investigate what's going on, to inquire into ourselves, what is happening, or if that quality of inquiry is not there, but we know how to engage it and we know we can perfect our realizations, right? Simply by abiding in a less judgmental state or in a deep curiosity, an interest, a motivation to be free from suffering. So we want to look more deeply and without judgment at what we're experiencing. Those are the keys here. Um, so investigation of dhammas, inquiry into insight. Really, this is where wisdom begins to take flight, where the Buddha tells us that this second factor of awakening is really about the dawning of our own self-understanding and understanding of things as they are. what sometimes is called discriminating wisdom, Dhamma Vichaya. That's the Sanskrit term for it, Dhamma Vichaya. And basically, one of the keys here to Dhamma Vichaya is, or this inquiry into insights, is to check our motivation. So in Tibetan Buddhism particularly, motivation is at the heart of everything we do in our practice, not just sitting on the cushion, but out in the world, interacting with family, with friends. We're never wanting to be far from that motivation. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's called bodhicitta, the motivation to respond compassionately, the spontaneous resolve to respond lovingly, unconditionally, um, when we encounter suffering, and that responding not only helps us to awaken, but it helps those around us to awaken too. That it's not just a closed system, but that it is, in fact, a radiating system. It creates an environment. It's the beauty of this quality. Um, so ask to see your own motivation in any given moment. And sometimes that's the tricky part. We may not want to be motivated to practice we're just exhausted. We are tired. We need a break, for goodness sakes. It's like, and so, but that's okay too. We acknowledge, we investigate that exhaustion, again, without judgment. But we know the motivation is still there. We haven't lost it because it is inherent to some extent in the good heart of who we are already. So it's more uncovering the motivation than it is changing into it. Yeah? Um, the last thing I'll say about this one too is, um, and this can be a slippery slope, so I want to be careful when we talk about karma. But it is a part of this factor of awakening. And largely, when we talk about this word karma, we've devoted this to other sessions before, and we can do it again if there's interest. But karma, the word karma literally means action. It's that what we do has an outcome. It's not a moralistic, right, wrong, judgmental thing, but it's simply looking deeply at cause and effect. If we can do it with compassion, if we can look deeply with a sense of evenness of mind and equanimity, this is when we learn, oh, whenever I do this, this happens. Whenever I have this impulse, if I give into it, that's the example I always use is chocolate. I want chocolate. I actually brought out the chocolate earlier when my girlfriend was here, and we were having pu'er tea, this beautiful, very beautiful cake of pu'er tea. And she said, "You're going to eat chocolate with the tea?" I said, "No, I'm just going to keep it over here." I managed to resist because we needed to take, this is very, very good tea. It comes in a cake wrapped in paper, and it's really lovely. So, but the point is that impulse to have the chocolate um, has a cause and effect. I shouldn't be eating it because technically I have an allergy to it. I know. Isn't that sad? It's shocking, but I have an allergy to chocolate and I eat it anyway. Cause and effect. As you can see, I'm not judging myself too harshly for it, and I don't end up in anaphylaxis, so that's good. But in any case, that's part of inquiry into insight is also seeing cause and effect in our own lives, in our own experiences. When I have this feeling, this is the narrative that grows out of it. Yeah. When I let myself settle, all of a sudden I feel I perceive the world differently. This is an outcome that we may not have been able to feel a minute ago because bound up in samsara, bound up, um, we may be convinced that I'm looking at things this way and I can't see it any other way. God only knows when I'll be able to see it differently. And then I take a breath. I settle in. I let myself drop all that heaviness down into the ground below me, into the chair or wherever I'm sitting. I let go and I feel a subtle sense of freedom. All of a sudden, there is an effect. Yeah? So it's attuning ourselves, and we come to learn by paying attention in a non judgmental way to our reactions and as well as the peacefulness that's there underlying those reactions. So it's not just looking at bad things, but it's also getting to know that which is fundamentally bright and calm and ever present, but very subtle. Subtle mind, the mind of openness, the mind of shunyata, where nothing is being created. What's called unborn awareness. It's just there. It's very subtle. And yet that potential seed for that is called Tathagata in Buddhism. The Tathagata Garbha. This is the sort of potential, the seed of our awakening is there at the heart of this awareness. So when we touch into that through practice, um, discernment gets clearer. We have a different view. And our motivation, if its motivation is compassionate, altruistic, and skillful, not that just anything goes, right? Wantonly and recklessly, but rather skillful responding by letting the mind settle is a beautiful balance of things. This is possible for each and every one of us. We have all the materials to do this, but it takes time, it takes practice, yeah?